I used to believe keeping cash in the bank was the safest and smartest financial decision anyone could ever make. Society taught me that saving money meant responsibility, intelligence, and long-term security without needing deeper understanding from childhood onward. For years, I followed that advice, faithfully trusting banks to protect my money and my future without asking serious questions. But one day, I realized something uncomfortable was happening quietly, while my money appeared perfectly safe inside the system itself. Even though my bank balance looked stable, the real purchasing power of my money was slowly shrinking every single year. If you have ever saved responsibly, yet still felt financially stuck, this conversation is meant specifically for you. Today, I want to expose the biggest money lie ever told and explain why cash in the bank is not safe. Before we continue, if honest discussions like this help you think more clearly about money, gently support the channel. Liking this video helps it reach people who quietly worry about finances but rarely hear simple, honest explanations. Feel free to comment below if you were taught that keeping cash in the bank was always the safest choice. And if you want more clear, practical conversations about money without confusing jargon, subscribe for future videos released on this channel. I promise to break down complex financial ideas using simple language anyone can understand and apply in everyday real life. Now let me ask you an uncomfortable question that most people never seriously stop to consider about their own money. What if the place you trust most to protect your money is quietly making you poorer every year? Banks feel safe because nothing dramatic happens, but slow losses are far more dangerous than sudden financial shocks. Inflation does not announce itself loudly. It quietly reduces what your money can actually buy over time each passing year. Your bank balance may grow slightly, but groceries, housing, and energy costs usually grow much faster than your savings ever. This invisible gap between interest and inflation is where long-term damage to savers quietly occurs inside traditional banking systems. I once made this exact mistake, trusting the system without questioning how money truly works for most of my life. That realization forced me to relearn everything I thought I understood about saving and financial safety from the very beginning. Most people think losing money means market crashes, not quiet erosion happening slowly while they sleep peacefully at night daily. I learned real risk is invisible because it feels normal, familiar, and boring instead of sudden, frightening, and dramatic. When inflation rises faster than bank interest, your savings shrink, even though statements suggest progress and stability over long time. This is why I stopped measuring wealth by account balances and started focusing on purchasing power instead over the years. To understand this shift, you must first understand how money actually moves and loses value inside the economy today. Coits, banks offer interest, but that interest rarely beats inflation, especially during uncertain economic periods for average savers every single year. So while you feel disciplined and responsible, your money is quietly working against you inside the banking system today alone. I realized safety is not about avoiding movement, but about choosing the right direction for long-term financial survival goals. This realization pushed me to question everything I was taught about saving, investing, and risk growing up in school systems. That questioning eventually led me to a simple framework that changed how I see money forever in my adult life. It is called the cash flow quadrant, and it explains why people earn differently even when they work equally hard daily. This framework helped me see income sources, not job titles, determine long-term financial outcomes for most people today everywhere. On one side, people trade time for money, seeking stability and security through salaries, wages, benefits, routines, habits, daily life. On the other side, people build systems, assets, and investments that work without constant effort from daily personal labor demands. Understanding where you stand today determines how vulnerable your money truly is to inflation, taxes, bad decisions, fear cycles overall. Courage. I realized keeping cash felt safe emotionally, but dangerous financially. Once I understood inflation impacts over long periods of time, that is when I stopped asking where my money was stored and asked how it worked for me personally daily. This question led me away from cash and toward assets designed to protect value during inflationary economic cycles long term. Assets behave differently because they can grow produce income or adjust with inflation through pricing power. Demand shifts market forces. Once I understood this distinction, my entire approach to money began to change in practical, measurable ways over time, consistently. Most people never learn this because schools teach saving behavior, but ignore how money actually behaves economically over long periods. I was taught to avoid risk, yet nobody explained the hidden risk of doing nothing financially over long-term periods. Doing nothing feels comfortable because habits stay unchanged, and responsibility appears fulfilled without visible consequences for many years of adulthood. Inflation quietly punishes patience by rewarding spending debt and asset ownership instead of traditional saving discipline during modern economic cycles. Once I saw this pattern, I understood why working harder never solved my long-term money stress or financial anxiety. This is where Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant helped me organize financial reality clearly into simple, understandable categories for everyday people. The quadrant shows 4 ways people earn money and why outcomes differ dramatically over time depending on structure leverage mindset. The first group trades time for money and depends heavily on employers for security benefits, stability routines, approval, permission, survival. I spent years here believing loyalty and effort would eventually create financial safety, stability, independence, freedom, dignity, confidence, long-term. The second group works for themselves but remains trapped because income stops when effort stops unexpectedly during illness, burnout emergencies. I realized both groups chase security yet remain financially fragile during economic shocks, recessions, layoffs, inflation, crises, transitions, disruptions, cycles. Everything changed when I studied how business owners build systems instead of trading hours for income growth, scale, leverage, freedom. Systems allow income to continue even when the owner steps away temporarily during rest, illness, travel, learning, reflection, recovery seasons. This concept opened my eyes to why assets matter more than effort over decades of economic change, inflation cycles globally. Assets behave differently because they can grow, adjust, and produce income automatically without constant supervision, labor presence, stress, worry, anxiety. This realization shifted my focus away from cash toward ownership and control over income streams, pricing power, decisions, outcomes, freedom. The third quadrant includes business owners who leverage team, systems, and capital to scale operations, reduce dependence, increase resilience sustainably. These people do not work less. They work differently with strategic intent, focusing on design, leverage, structure, outcomes, impact long-term. Watching this taught me, freedom comes from structure, not endless personal effort, sacrifice, exhaustion. Over time, hustle, stress, anxiety, burnout cycles. Then I reached the fourth quadrant where money itself becomes the worker generating income, compounding returns while you sleep peacefully. Investors focus on allocating capital wisely. So money grows, works, compounds, adapts across market cycles, inflation, taxes, time efficiently, sustainably. This shift taught me real security comes from cash flow assets, not static balances protected by false comfort and tradition narratives. Once you see these quadrants clearly, you cannot unsee why saving cash alone fails people long-term financially over decades. That understanding prepared me to examine assets that actually defend value during inflation uncertainty and policy mistakes globally over time. The first asset category that changed my thinking completely was business ownership in various scalable, practical forms for ordinary people. Businesses create income because they solve problems repeatedly, and customers willingly pay regardless of your daily presence or location schedule. Owning even small businesses taught me income can detach from hours, effort, moods, health, energy cycles sustainably over long periods. This is why the richest people historically build or buy businesses instead of saving cash passively through banks alone indefinitely. Businesses can grow prices with inflation protecting margins, revenues, and purchasing power over time better than cash savings accounts ever. Next, I explored real estate because it combines income, leverage, tax advantages, and inflation protection together in one tangible asset. Real estate felt intimidating until I learned it behaves differently from cash during inflationary environments and policy shifts over decades. Rental properties can generate monthly cash flow while property values and rents adjust upward long-term with demand-supply pressures naturally. What shocked me most was depreciation, which lowers taxable income, while assets often increase value on paper versus reality differences. This legal accounting concept rewards owners by reducing taxes without reducing actual cash flow received annually significantly during ownership periods long-term. I realized wealthy people think about taxes differently because rules favor assets, production ownership structures, incentives, scale leverage, patience strategy. Cash savers focus on income taxes, while asset owners focus on optimizing after-tax cash flow legally, sustainably, predictably over time. Understanding this difference helped me see why real estate remains powerful across generations during inflationary cycles, recessions, recoveries, expansions, shifts. The third asset category is paper assets, including stocks, funds, and financial instruments traded publicly globally with varying risks returns. Paper assets offer liquidity and growth, but demand education, patience, discipline, and emotional control during volatility correction cycles. News noise. Without understanding, markets' paper assets feel risky, but with knowledge they become tools for long-term wealth, building diversification resilience. I learned paper assets reward long-term thinking, but punish emotional reactions driven by fear headlines, hype, panic selling behavior. This is why education matters more than excitement when investing in markets influenced by narratives, cycles, policies, psychology, sentiment. The fourth asset category that changed my perspective deeply was commodities, especially gold, silver, and essential resources globally traded. Commodities hold value because they exist physically and cannot be created instantly by governments, banks, or central authorities. Gold historically preserves purchasing power during inflation, crises, currency debasement, and systemic trust breakdowns across civilizations centuries worldwide. Silver fascinated me because it combines monetary value with industrial demand across technology, energy, healthcare, manufacturing sectors globally. When money is printed, excessively tangible resources tend to rise because more currency chases limited real-world supply. I saw this clearly during recent inflation spikes when commodity prices adjusted faster than wages, savings accounts incomes. This is why cash struggles because it has no defense mechanism against dilution caused by policy decisions beyond savers' control. Assets respond, adapt, or produce value, while cash remains passive, exposed, vulnerable, silent, eroding slowly every year. Once I understood these four asset categories, my fear around money slowly transformed into clarity, direction, confidence, purpose. Diversification across assets is not about complexity, but about survival, adaptability, balance, resilience through economic uncertainty cycles. Each asset class plays a different role, protecting income, growth, liquidity, stability during changing conditions, inflation regimes, volatility environments. Holding only cash concentrates risk, even though it feels conservative, responsible, disciplined, socially approved, widely encouraged. Traditionally, I realized risk comes from misunderstanding money, not from learning how assets actually behave over time cycles. Corinduth. This knowledge shifted my mindset from preservation to intelligent growth through ownership, education, patience, strategy, discipline, consistency. Once mindset changes, actions follow, leading to different outcomes than most people experience financially during their lifetimes. That is why I believe financial education should be considered a survival skill, not optional knowledge. Learning how assets work gives you control, choices, and confidence during uncertainty instead of fear, confusion, helplessness, dependency. This understanding prepared me to apply simple principles that guide my financial decisions consistently today. Tao. The first principle I adopted was prioritizing assets that generate cash flow instead of relying solely on earned income. Cash flow creates breathing room, reducing stress, giving options, flexibility, and resilience during unexpected life changes, events, emergencies. I stopped asking how much interest my bank paid and started asking how assets paid me consistently. This shift changed my daily decisions, spending habits, saving strategies, learning priorities, and long-term financial planning direction. The second principle was committing to continuous financial education instead of outsourcing decisions to institutions' advisors' media headlines. Gwent. I realized nobody cares about my money more than me, so understanding basics became non-negotiable responsibility. Education helped me separate noise from signal, especially during volatile markets. Sensational news cycles, fear-driven commentary. Simple understanding prevents panic mistakes which destroy more wealth than bad investments over time historically. The third principle involved using leverage, carefully understanding both its power and its dangers clearly before application. Leverage amplifies outcomes, so ignorance turns small mistakes into catastrophic losses without warning quickly. When used wisely, leverage accelerates. Growth reduces taxes, improves efficiency, and expands opportunities beyond linear saving. I learned to respect leverage by studying scenarios, stress testing assumptions, and maintaining conservative margins. The fourth principle was surrounding myself with people who think differently about money growth ownership strategy. Conversations shape beliefs. Beliefs shape actions, and actions shape long-term financial outcomes for individuals, families, communities. Being around asset-focused thinkers normalized ideas schools never taught, and media rarely explains clearly. The fifth principle was embracing mistakes as tuition rather than proof of personal failure, incompetence, or bad luck. Every mistake taught me something valuable, refining judgment, discipline, patience, and emotional control progressively. Avoiding mistakes entirely is impossible, but avoiding learning guarantees stagnation, regret, missed opportunities forever. These principles gave me a framework to act calmly instead of emotionally during uncertainty, turbulence, change. With this framework, I stopped fearing inflation banks headlines and began focusing on controllable actions. Over time, I realized confidence comes from clarity, not prediction, because markets stay uncertain while principles remain reliable long-term. Instead of guessing economic outcomes, I focused on building systems that function reasonably well across many different scenarios. This approach reduced anxiety because my plan no longer depended on perfect timing, luck forecasts, or secret insider information. I stopped obsessing over daily financial news and redirected attention toward habits, actions, and decisions I could actually control. Gradually, my relationship with money shifted from fear and avoidance toward curiosity, learning, and strategic long-term thinking. Pourris, I finally understood banks are useful tools, not guardians, and cash is a temporary instrument, not a permanent destination. Cash works best as a bridge for transactions, emergencies, and opportunities, rather than a long-term wealth storage solution. When people treat cash as safety, they unknowingly accept guaranteed loss through inflation taxes and missed compounding growth. This realization helped me forgive my past mistakes, because ignorance around money is common and rarely intentional. I share this story not to criticize savers, but to encourage better questions and deeper thinking about money. Kuiteros. Asking better questions leads to better choices, and better choices compound into dramatically different financial outcomes. You do not need extreme intelligence, insider access, or massive capital to start thinking differently about money. You only need willingness to learn, patience to apply principles, and courage to question comfortable, familiar myths. The biggest money lie survives because it feels safe, familiar, socially approved, and rarely challenged deeply. Once that lie breaks, your perspective widens, and financial decisions become calmer, clearer, and far more intentional. Karu. You begin seeing banks' assets, taxes, inflation, and income as interconnected systems rather than isolated, confusing topics. This systems view actually simplifies complexity instead of increasing confusion, intimidation, or emotional financial overwhelm. Simplicity creates consistency, and consistency matters more than intensity for long-term wealth-building success. Small, intelligent actions repeated for many years outperform dramatic moves driven by fear, excitement, impatience. This mindset shift finally freed me from blindly trusting cash as safety and reshaped my financial life. Before we finish, I want to leave you with a simple perspective that can change decisions immediately today for you. Money safety is not about where cash sits, but about how value is protected over time during your entire lifetime. If inflation exists, and it does, then doing nothing guarantees loss, regardless of comfort routines, habits, beliefs, expectations, social norms. Understanding this allows you to act calmly instead of reacting emotionally to headlines, fear, or panic-driven financial media cycles. I encourage you to review where your money actually lives and how it behaves yearly during inflationary economic cycles today. 3. Ask yourself whether cash alone truly protects you or simply feels familiar and socially approved by tradition upbringing culture systems. This question matters because your future purchasing power depends on decisions made quietly today, not emotions, opinions, habits, excuses later. You do not need perfection. You need awareness, intention, and consistent action repeated patiently over many years despite discomfort, uncertainty. Start small, stay curious, and focus on learning how assets work before chasing returns promoted by hype trends, influencers' cycles. This approach builds confidence because knowledge compounds just like assets over long periods through experience, discipline, mistakes, reflection, patience, time. Remember, banks are businesses designed to profit, not personalized solutions for protecting individual wealth goals. Needs risks, timelines, preferences, circumstances. Cash has a role, but it should serve you, not silently erode your future through inflation, complacency, misunderstanding, neglect, inaction. Learning this earlier could have saved me years of stress, confusion, and lost opportunity cost caused by misinformation, fear, comfort. That is why I share this message, hoping it shortens your learning curve significantly before mistakes compound quietly over decades. If this perspective helped you think differently, consider supporting the channel in simple ways that help others discover clarity sooner. Liking, sharing, and subscribing signals that honest financial conversations deserve more visibility among everyday people seeking clarity, stability, confidence, control. Comment below about where you currently keep most of your money and why it feels safe, uncertain, temporary, strategic, intentional. Your answers help guide future videos focused on practical steps, not financial hype, fear, manipulation, jargon, confusion, noise, distractions, trends. My goal is helping you see money clearly so you can make calmer, smarter decisions for yourself, family, future, freedom. Remember, the biggest money lie only works when it remains unquestioned and comfortably familiar, accepted, repeated, normalized, rewarded socially, culturally. Kondo. Once you question that lie, you regain control over choices, habits, strategies, and financial direction instead of drifting passively. Control does not mean certainty. It means understanding trade-offs, risks, opportunities, and consequences clearly before acting intentionally. I learned peace around money comes from preparation, not prediction, and from structure, not blind hope or optimism. Preparation means holding cash intentionally while building assets designed to survive inflation, taxes, volatility, uncertainty cycles. This balance allows flexibility without sacrificing long-term growth, purchasing power, resilience, dignity, independence, confidence, freedom. Many people wait for perfect clarity, but clarity often appears after action, learning, reflection, and adjustment over time. Taking small steps today beats waiting years, while inflation quietly compounds losses against inactive savings. I wasted time believing safety meant stillness when progress actually required thoughtful movement and ownership mindset. Once movement begins, fear decreases because understanding replaces uncertainty, and confidence grows through experience, repetition, consistency. This is why education always comes before execution, and why impatience destroys more wealth than ignorance ever does. If you feel overwhelmed, remember you only need to improve direction slightly, not redesign your entire financial life. Direction determines destination. Even when speed feels slow, progress compounds invisibly before results become obvious later. Most financial success stories look boring daily, but powerful over decades due to consistency, discipline, patience, alignment. I am not asking you to abandon banks only to stop trusting them blindly with your future. Use banks as tools, not shelters, and use cash as fuel, not a permanent hiding place. Once you see money this way, fear loosens its grip and choices become calmer, clearer, more deliberate. This mindset protects you, regardless of headlines, recessions, policy changes, or economic narratives dominating conversations. Because principles outlast cycles while emotions react briefly, then disappear, leaving consequences behind permanently. The sooner you internalize this, the more time your assets have to work quietly for you. Time is the only resource inflation cannot steal when you align it with ownership learning, patience, discipline. If you remember one idea from this video, let it be this. Cash feels safe but silently loses value. Safety without understanding is illusion. And illusions eventually collapse when reality arrives through inflation crisis shocks. I shared this not to scare you, but to help you see money more clearly and calmly. Clarity creates confidence, and confidence allows better decisions, even during uncertainty pressure. Fear, noise, distraction. You do not need to rush, but you do need to start questioning comfortable beliefs that no longer serve. Deisu. The earlier you shift perspective, the more time your money has to compound, protect, grow, serve you. If this video helped you think differently, share it with someone still trusting cash blindly without understanding. Subscribe for future videos where I break down money topics simply, honestly, and without unnecessary complexity or hype. Comment below. What changed your thinking most? Because your perspective helps guide conversations we create together here. Remember, the biggest money lie loses power the moment you see it clearly and refuse to accept it. X2.